The Darktide solo queue experience is best put as a box of chocolates.
You never know what you're gonna get.
From teammates that try to solo an entire mission, running off into the great beyond, to ammo hoggers who can just take an ammo box with just a single bullet fired, it can be a frustrating experience. To counteract this, I have made an instructional video or a tip video so that everyone can learn how to become a better teammate in Darktide. Tip number 1. Stick with your teammates and remain in direct line of sight as much as possible. Your teammates have abilities that buff you when in coherency range. By leaving that, you are essentially giving up buffs that may mean the difference between life and death. These range from more grenades having that utility to toughness damage reduction when being hit and toughness regeneration. When you leave coherency, you should stay within line of sight. You never know if a hound, trapper, or mutant may get you whilst you're fighting a horde. If your teammates can see you, they can shoot, bounce grenades off of walls, or use their special abilities to save you. And they can't do that if you're behind a corner. Tip number 2, have a balanced weapon loadout when possible. A run's success depends on your team balancing a 4-way seesaw of capabilities of killing hordes unarmored, killing hordes armored, elites and specials, and bosses. Specializing in one or two areas in terms of team composition means that you will face detriments in others and you cannot adapt to cover weaknesses. So by bringing a balanced weapon loadout as an individual person guarantees some level of capability in all those areas, increasing the success chances of a run. Tip 3. Know your teammates' weapons and adapt your playstyle around to best suit the team. In this example, I am a lone zealot with 3 psychers. Lucky me. That means I can go ham with the flamethrower to control the hordes, as I know that the psychers could pop the heads of elites and specials for me. And for the boss, I did the same thing. I lit that thing up because ammo was not a concern. Tip number 4, use your teammates as horde magnets. Now, we have all encountered those people that want to speedrun an entire mission, screaming, "For the Emperor!" and getting themselves surrounded within a horde and then getting down. We can essentially exploit this behavior by using grenades to clear clumps of enemies. Here is an example. My teammate is in trouble. I am far away from him. What I do is I pop a frag grenade to free the space around him, serving as both a benefit to him by not having him downed by all those enemies, but also removing a bunch of enemies in the process. Tip number 5, have at least one Curio with +1 wound. On the Heresy and Damnation difficulties, you lose 1 wound as part of that difficulty. By having an extra down state, it means that even if you do go down, you'll be able to stay with your team longer rather than needing to be rescued. Needing to be rescued means that you will essentially be robbing your team of 25% of its capabilities, substantially jeopardizing the mission's success rate. I personally myself have found that if one person goes down, the difficulty level just spikes substantially. Having 2 people needing to be rescued is almost a guaranteed death sentence. Tip number 6, bind the tag button to the primary mouse attack button. Something that I've seen is that people do not tag enemies nearly enough at any difficulty. And it is highly important because it is the elites and specials that are primarily responsible for ending a run, particularly when there is also a horde accompanying them, giving you limited options of movement and response. Tagging these elites and specials in hordes allows you for your teammates that do have that momentary breathing room to quickly kill them before they do any sort of damage or disrupt your team. Tip number 7, you can tag enemies whilst down. Now, you can still be useful to your team when down because you can tag elites and specials, especially when it comes to snipers. In my games, I have seen one person become down by a sniper, and then when they go down, their teammate rushes over to them, not knowing that there's already a sniper covering that particular area, and then the sniper gets the second person. So, by tagging them, you can avoid those situations. Tip number 8. Taunt disabling specials when possible. Now, let me explain. I know you cannot technically taunt in Darktide, but what I'm trying to get at is if you feel confident in your dodging and pushing abilities and timing those right, you can place yourself between specials and your teammates, particularly trappers and hounds, so that they target you in order to dodge them. This could be the difference between one person being disabled in a horde and ending a run, or keeping the team's momentum and just having it be a slight obstacle. Tip number 9. Use voice and text chat to coordinate. In the options menu, you can check your default push to talk button and also enable voice chat if it's disabled. Now, in my experience, a well-timed message to coordinate a team has saved entire runs through dropping down medkits when everyone's low on health, or dropping ammo crates so that people can reload and just be geared up for the next fight, or even luring a boss to a better fighting arena just so that it cannot fully utilize its strengths to end a run for a team. Tip number 10. Always ask if a team is doing Grims. Now, not everybody may be on board with doing Grims, especially the squishier classes who will be going down a whole lot more or even dying a whole lot more. It's always common courtesy to ask rather than mindlessly picking them up. This may not apply as much to the higher difficulties, but it's just common courtesy to do so. Tip number 11. If the team has agreed to doing Grims and picking them up, always ensure that the Grims goes to the most durable, quote, teammate. As a default, you should always choose the highest max HP character to hold Grims, because the ticking corruption damage does less of a percentage health damage overall to their bars than to the squishier classes. However, you need to balance this default train of thought by considering that characters with only 2 wounds may not be best, even if they have the most HP. So you always have to ask yourself, if they've been taking a lot more hits and more likely to go down, the highest max HP character might not be the most optimal solution because they are more likely to lose it. But as a default, always choose the highest max HP character to hold it. Tip number 12. Toss objectives rather than carry them. Now, when you carry objectives such as ammunition boxes or power cells or anything like that, you can only shove enemies. It does very little damage, if at all. Tossing allows you to retain the ability to fight and kill enemies, but also make progress towards carrying that objective to where it needs to go. As a bonus on this tip, have Ogrins carry all these pickup items, because they are faster carrying these relative to other classes, and this is pretty lore accurate as well. Tip number 13. Dance around hordes in melee combat, not straight through. Now, melee combat is this delicate dance of swinging a weapon, dodging, and shoving enemies back to give you space. Many melee swings stagger enemies, so if you wade into the center of a horde, all the enemies behind you won't have their attacks interrupted. You'll only be doing that to the people in the front. So keeping hordes in front of you in your field of view when possible essentially lowers the output of damage that they can do to you. Tip number 14. Approach hordes in a line or a concave as a team. This tip applies to Ogrins especially, because too often I have seen people sponge bullets meant for the enemy because they block line of sight, and this is particularly easy for the fat ass Ogren. It is all too common for a sharpshooter to activate their special ability and for the Ogren to just move in front of the field of view and then block all the shots. And then the veteran has to spend crucial time to move around that Ogren to just shoot at what they were supposed to. So, The tip is fan out and maintain awareness of your teammates' positions, so in order to ensure that all the damage goes towards the enemy and not be absorbed by friendly fire. Tip number 15, provide rearguard security. Random enemies can be left behind in semi-cleared areas, and they can sneak up and hit someone whilst they are not watching, doing a chunk of damage. And especially if this happens repeatedly, this can add up over time, leaving a person in a very weakened HP state. So everyone needs to occasionally look back to kill any sneaky enemies, or be on the lookout for certain audio cues for enemies that might be sneaking up behind them. And this will help ensure that no one gets snuck up upon. There you have it. These are some tips to hopefully improve everyone's solo queue experience, making those Heresy and Damnation difficulty runs just a little bit more successful and on the pathway to much more loot and getting the perks and blessings that we all want. If you enjoyed the content, consider subscribing for more content.